obstructing sidewalks. Groups of pedestrians utilize.
Yes, they're lovely people chanting pigs, pigs, pigs. That's from New York City, as you could tell by the NYPD, a recent protest. Joining us now is Temple University history professor Ralph Young, who is the author of a new one. It's Dissent, the History of an American Idea. And I welcome you, sir. Good to see you.
Nice to meet you.
All right. So talk about, I mean, you obviously, Dissent has played a role in the development, the history of this country from our earliest days when we rose up, we being our forefathers and descendants from against the King of England.
Yes, yes. My thesis in my book is that dissent is the central character of the United States. In fact, we were born out of dissent. We had religious dissenters in the 17th century, Quakers and Puritans setting up colonies. In the 18th century, political dissenters led to the American Revolution. And then we put the right to dissent in the First Amendment of the Constitution, and we've been protesting ever since.
How have protesters, or maybe how has dissent changed? Has there been a path, a straight path from where we were to where we are, or has it gone kind of back and forth in terms of frequency, violence, nonviolence? How's it progressed?
Yeah, well, you're exactly right. It's in fits and starts. I think generally speaking, dissent has led to progress, but of course progress itself is a disputed term. For some people, progress is regress.
Right.
And for every couple of steps forward that people make, there's a couple of steps back, and so it's a little bit like hopscotch, I guess.
How is the, do you believe, the media affected dissent and again, I don't know, you tell me. I don't want to label dissent as protests only. I mean, there's other forms of dissent which I will ask you in a second. But how do you believe the media, especially today's 24-hour cable news, how has it affected protests based on dissent?
Well, it definitely does have an impact. And if you think back to 1968, the couple of years before that, all of the protests against the Vietnam were depicted in the media rather negatively. And then once popular opinion began to turn against the war, the protests were depicted much more favorably.
Right.
And then of course, one thinks then, well, did the media impact protest, or did the protests themselves impact the media?
Yeah, and that's which came first, the chicken or the egg.
Right.
And we could see that today when the CNN, for one, goes down to Baltimore, and there's a handful of people on the street corner, and they say, "Oh, what do you?" And then the crowd builds and swells and swells. And were they going to be there if there was no coverage, or are they there because of the coverage?
Yeah, and well, a lot of times, of course, when people go out on a protest, the intent is to get coverage because you're trying to get the message out,
right,
whatever your message is.
What about the for instance, the hands up, don't shoot. And there are T-shirts referencing the chokehold of Eric Garner. But the hands up, don't shoot, which the black Attorney General of the United States stood in front of the American public and said never happened. Yet it's still chanted at protests.
Yeah. Well, the thing with what's been happening in Ferguson and Baltimore, and this has been a problem for a long time. African Americans being killed, and it seems like people are beginning to get very upset about it now, and the protests are building.
Well, usually African Americans are killed by African Americans. I mean, more whites are killed by cops than blacks. Not related to the proportionality of the population, but blacks commit most of the crime. Blah blah. We could always. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, one of the things is that social media is really fueling this a lot, because, for example, that policeman in South Carolina who shot the fleeing black man in the back, it was
that
obvious
appears to be unjustifiable, but yes.
Right. So something like that gets out there, and it really riles people up.
What would beside dissent? So beside protests, and we had about a minute. What's been some of the other forms of dissent as you would view them?
Well, the ways of getting the message out have been through protest songs, posters, street art,
T-shirts,
all sorts of things. And basically, dissenters use the latest technology.
Are we going to have robots one day protesting in the streets on behalf of dissenters?
Maybe they'll be protesting the fact that there are not enough humans anymore or something.
Yeah, or enough human control. You never know. Yeah, that's something that's coming. Well, anyway, it's a great book which it takes you through a long history of this country, and at the very least, people will learn a lot about the history of this country and how protests from the very beginning till now have played a huge role in all of that. I thank you for coming up, sir. Good luck with the book. Again, Dissent, The History of an American Idea, ladies and gentlemen. And when we come back, we're going to have much, much more of the Steve Malzberg Show straight ahead, only on Newsmax Television. Don't go away. Thank you again. I really